Next one important factor to do your experiment is your sampling, which is your participant. Because every participants are different and every research is different, and you have to identify them. You can find a population which is Malaysians or Americans or Singaporeans or different ethnicity, can be Chinese, Malay or Indian, or it can be students, mothers, parents, or it can even be different people living in different places, like people living in Cheras or people living in Kapong, Selayang. Because they have different, because Cheras itself, it has different context, or Bangsa, it has a different context that might bring a different outcome or different result. You can have a random sampling, everyone has an equal chance, and you have to focus on your quota sample. What is a good number of participants? Some people argue that 30 participants is sufficient, but of course, the more it's always the merrier, because the more you would not result your outcome to external variables or external influences. Now, some of the threats that when you do your experiment is external validity, internal validity. External validity, it refers to outside of your experiment that might influence the outcome of your studies. Internal validity, it means the experiment within, inside, it has already problems. So you have to be aware of these things. Before you even start your experiment, you have to try to eliminate, if not possible, you have to try to reduce them. This one you need to do them before you start your experiment. Next one, the main effect, and also the interaction effect. Sometimes because everything is influencing each other, or they're interacting with each other, so sometimes your outcome may be because of the interaction effect, which you are not aware of. This is called a confounded variable. That's why it is important for you when you do your research, you have to strictly and clearly identify what you want to test, what you want to know, who your people are, and try to eliminate what are the possibles and what are the possibilities that might influence your result. Now, next one is social desirability. Means people or participants, they tend to answer in direct with what people want. Let's say if you want to test helping behavior, of course, when you ask about, if you give them a questionnaire, do you help? Of course, they would tick yes. Well, why are you a kind person? Of course, they would tick yes, because that's what people desire in the social world. Even though in your private life you might be kicking the cats or you might be throwing the dogs, but when you do your questionnaire, you want to put a tick. I am kind and I am helpful. And these are some of the threats present in the experiment. So the problem here is that you have to try to find a way so that the experimenter doesn't know that you're trying to test helping behavior. Next one is an experimental expectancy effect, which is you. Now, we tend to, as a psychologist or a researcher, we tend to expect something to happen. If your hypothesis questions that happy people produce a happy mood, of course, throughout your experiment, you would always hope that I want this result to be supported. But often than not, this kind of attitude, it would bring an effect on your experiment, because unconsciously or consciously, you would be doing something to support your result. And you can't blame the experimenter actually, because the experimenter will spend a lot of time, a lot of research, a lot of time to do, to look at the articles, to look at archives, and to form hypotheses. A lot of time it's being put into the research. So the experimenter, of course, they want a result that makes them happy. Next one, some experiments are just not possible to conduct, and this world is not perfect. Experiments are not perfect. Some things you are not just possible to do it. You can talk about killing or murder. You can't just do an experiment on killing or murder. The most you can do is on archives or interviews to understand what they're thinking. Next one, you can't conduct research due to ethical reasons. Back to the ethical reasons, we are bound by some of the ethics within APA. Now we go into ethical issues. What is ethics? 5 principles and specific ethical standards that we need to adhere to. The first one is beneficence and non-maleficence, which is including you look after the welfare of the participants. You make sure that they are not tired, they are not forced, they are not being forced off, that they are willing, and try not to include money inside your experiment because you have to take care of the welfare of your participants, like how a mother and a father takes care of their children. You have to make sure that they are in a happy mood. Next one is B, fidelity and responsible. We need to know what our role is. As a psychologist, we can't break laws. We can't do things that's against our contract, which is our ethics. Next one is our C. Principle C, integrity. Psychologists, they are people with integrity. We need to be accurate, fairness, honesty, and truthfulness. Often, some people, they tend to manipulate or they change the answer or the results of their research because they want to make themselves happy. Let's say, for one example, it's the cloning of human or the cloning of sheep by a South Korean. The South Korean famous experimenter say that he has cloned something which wasn't right at all, which wasn't true at all. He has break the principle C, which is the integrity. He wanted to do that in order to be famous, or he wanted to support his own hypothesis. Next one is D, we need to be justice. We need to have no bias. We need to know our boundaries, what to do, what not to do. We need to know our competence. Are you able to carry that experiment out? Okay? And also our expertise. You need to have a certain knowledge in order to carry out your experiment. And the last one is to respect. This is very important, to respect for people's right and dignity, the right of privacy, confidentiality, and P&C is very important. You can ask your participants to fill in a questionnaire and then you show it to your friends, you show it to your mother because they are just busybody. You can't do that. You have to be professional and keep all these questionnaire inside your drawers. And also you have to be aware of some of the sensitive issues that you might come out in your experiments or inside your research. This could include religions or culture, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, which means poor people or rich people or medium people, your race, your gender identity, or your sexual orientation. These are some of the sensitive issues you have to know. Next one. At the end of this book, you have some self-tests. So let's look through together the questions. The first one. By conducting a correlation study, social psychologists can demonstrate cause and effect relationships between independent and dependent variable. And this is not true. Correlation, I didn't talk about that, but I hope that you can do your own studies on that. It's fairly simple. The answer is no. Correlation doesn't show a cause and effect relationship. Correlation only shows a relationship. There is a relationship between, let's say, the number of watching TV, the hours of watching TV, and also the aggressive level. It only shows the relationship. It doesn't mean the TV caused the aggression. It might be because the aggression caused the people to watch more TV, or it might be because some other factors that make these two obvious.